Good hello, I am Pisces Palmist, the online palmistry reader. This week I'm looking at the palms of Jennifer Lopez, and this palm reading was suggested to me by one of my subscribers about 2 weeks ago. After watching the Rupert Murdoch palm reading, you can watch that if you like. I'm not watching it. It made me feel a little bit sick. Anyway, this one's for you. Are we cool 177? And yes, we are, even though it's not a question because there's no question mark. So I've scoured the internet. Well, that's probably not the right word to use. I haven't scoured the internet. I've looked and I've not found incredible pictures. But I stopped when I found this one because it's pretty good. And the website that I found it on suggests that Jennifer Lopez has a fish on her sun mount. What is a fish? What constitutes as a fish? There are many different interpretations, and in this video, I'm going to provide my own interpretations as to what this means exactly and what this means on her hand. Well, when I first looked at her palm shape, I thought to myself, well, this is clearly a dynamic hand. It's broader at the top, and Jupiter's quite high. The Jupiter finger's quite dominant. The thumb is quite close to the palm's quite high set. The palm shape's kind of triangular. This is certainly a dynamic hand. And then I realized, well, actually, it's not quite that straightforward. The palm is not all that. Sorry about that. I had a parcel at my door. The palm itself is certainly on the square side, although it's ever so slightly rectangular, and the fingers are certainly long. Now, even when she's stretching her hands out as much as she can, we're still not seeing quite a 90-degree angle, and the thumb isn't as high set as I initially thought. So we're certainly looking at an air hand, to put it very simply, to put it in very basic terms, but to be more specific, to look at that system of 12 that I've mentioned very recently, this is a combination of an analytical and a practical palm. It's a very down-to-earth and grounded approach. A certain sort of penchant for the rules and loyalty is very strong, inherent within this person and their ideology and their own personality. This is someone who's certainly sort of demanding of structure, routine, order, and really kind of thrives off of these things, gains a sense of security from them. At the same time, this is certainly someone who stops and thinks. There's a duality here because although this person is quite sort of no nonsense and is probably quite firm but fair, there's also a more delicate side to this person, a softer side to this person, where they are dreaming and they are really quite, I don't want to say emotional, I don't like that word just because of the connotations attached to it, but she is. And I don't mean that in a negative way. She's quite sensitive, but doesn't allow herself, possibly, just on the surface here, to really let this show for fears of being weak, or open to attack. So I'm just trying to sum up what it means to be both practical and an analytical hand. Now, if you want to know what I mean about practical and analytical hands further, please do check out my website blog, the 12 method classification, 12 hand type method classification on my website, and it'll explain in great detail there what I mean by that. I'm not going to go into it too much here. What I also find really interesting about hand shape and fingers is the little finger. It is saying, I am going to be confined by no man, or no one, really. This is someone who's going to do things in their own way. They really need freedom in order to express themselves and work in their own way. Apollo, it sits apart from Saturn. Saturn and Jupiter kind of seem almost as one in their suits, in their alignment. And what this shows us is, again, this is someone who likes to work alone. Obviously, working as a film star, you can't. You have to work with quite a big crew, essentially. But this is someone who likely works on their lines, their routines, their choreography, their fight scenes. They probably do things in their own way, in their own time, in their own space, and get the most out of themselves when they're on their own, when they're doing things in their own way. And I'd really love to see her fingerprints. I just don't think we've got the clarity here, but I would expect to see something of a whirl or a peacock's eye on the fingerprint here on Jupiter. Certainly a whirl on Apollo. And I think there's a real kind of unique perspective about um, how she's going to go about doing her things and how she's going to create by going about those things. The Jupiter finger is long. Check it out. I mean, that's a nice and long Jupiter finger. You know, it's so long. It's almost neck and neck with Saturn. And I'm in two minds here because I'm one part of me is thinking, well, maybe Saturn's just short. But actually, I think what we have here is, Jupiter and Apollo are both long, especially Jupiter. And really, this shows a sense of dominance and control. There's a strong personality, a strong sense of authority. These are leadership qualities. And people probably come to her with their problems in life and look to this person to be delegated, to be told what to do, essentially. And I think for this person, parts of that dynamic hand, those traits there are, um, they do reside, but for the most part, this is someone who's going to struggle um, in sort of friendships and relationships, partly because it's their way or the highway. And that's what I'm getting from this, strong sense of dominance, an inability to, work with the crowd and to be confined by rules and law and order. At the same time, they have their own rules, a little bit like Mel Gibson. Order is certainly very important to this person, but they have their own order, their own sense of how they're going to get things done. The thumb is very telling. I mean, look at the strength of it, the size of it, but the shape of it. Look at just how it kind of it's pretty bulbous here, and what this means is this is actually what you would class as the murderous thumb in medieval palmistry, and that is because it shows a temper, an explosive temper, the tension in their thoughts and ideas, their logic is bottlenecked as it slopes upwards towards their overall personality, determination, willpower, their temperament, their temper quite literally explodes at times as it kind of um, chicanes and moves through its little sort of neck in the river, if you like. Imagine its water narrowing at a certain point in a gorge, and as it comes out and flows out, it kind of um, creates a massive current, um, tidal wave almost. I mean, it's not the worst I've seen, but it is pretty extreme, partly because it's so heavy. Now, that thumb here, combined with such a strong and dominant, controlling, authoritative nature, it's it doesn't bode well because really this person is probably very difficult to get along with, to work with, and to be in a relationship with, especially when they need a great deal of their own alone time. And they just do things in their own way. They're a bit of a loner, essentially. It's an odd combination of traits to have, to be so controlling and dominant, yet to, you know, actually just sort of be on your own so much. Whenever this person is around others, they are ensuring that they have everybody doing what they want them to do. Notice how the tip of Apollo is long. The phalange itself, the phalanx itself, it's long, and it shows an extra sort of capacity for understanding of natural beauty, of art, of creativity in itself, which is a really nice sign, especially for someone in her field. And it really heightens this person's understanding of aesthetics. The large knot seen on Apollo here, as well as Saturn, really, I mean, I'll go through what it means on Apollo. It slows down the sort of thought process and enlargens this discriminative thoughts and feelings about dress sense. So this combination with the, you know, enlarging capacity for appreciation, it means this person is a stickler for they're very critical, have a very critical eye. I don't mean it in a negative way completely, but they are fine comb detailing every kind of aspect of how a person looks and what things should look like, and in their own dress sense as well as um, how things feel and taste quite literally as well. So this person has a real eye for detail, and that again is partly why I believe she's so successful as an actor. In everything that she does, she's likely so critical of others, but also herself as well. And partly this is seen in the Heartline and the way it reaches right over on to Jupiter itself. And it kind of forms what looks like an island. And I think really what we see here is an ambition line that's fulfilled and achieved because it almost touches this ring here where the Jupiter finger meets the Jupiter mount. And the heartline itself is so idealistic as this person that their love is kind of met by ambition. It's almost as though they love their work. Work and ambition is intertwined with their strong feelings of emotional kind of ideologies. And again, this ties back in with just being so critical, such a critical nature of themselves and others. And highly idealistic people, they expect so much of others that they often find themselves in situations where they become hurt in relationships, in friendships, and in other, kind of arrangements. Things just don't work out as they expect them to, as they feel they should do. They put so much effort into this. Why isn't everyone else? And that's the kind of mindset this person is constantly in, which is partly why they're so critical, and which is partly why the Mercury leans away. They don't trust easily. This is someone with trust issues, partly because they find themselves let down so very often. And that's not necessarily because others are letting them down, it's because of their high ideology. They are highly idealistic. And that in itself is partly it's their own expectations that are, letting them down. If we don't keep our hopes up, we have nothing to lose. And this is certainly someone who cannot help but keep their hopes up. We all can't, help how we feel. There's nothing wrong with how we feel, but we can help our actions and how we react off of those feelings, our temper. Now, I realize I've said some fairly negative things about Jennifer Lopez, but I do want to kind of turn a corner a little bit here because look at the heartline. It is low lying, it's deep. And again, it reaches on to the Jupiter Mount. And this is partly the sign of a humanitarian, but also a bit of a philanthropist, someone who is very charitable and cares deeply. Although this is someone who is actually, as I mentioned, firm, they are also fair. There's a side to them that is actually quite delicate. Um, Maybe that's not the right word to use, but they are certainly very sensitive, and they have a strong emotional capacity, a strong need to love and be loved. It's just difficult in their own circumstances because of their particular sort of psychological alignment. Now, I mentioned earlier how Jupiter and Saturn are in alignment with each other, and this is great. In fact, there is actually quite a lot of alignment here. Notice how the fingers are well developed. There's no crookedness, there's no turning in. There's some partial turning in of Jupiter, which isn't a bad thing. Saturn also does it slightly as well. This is partly the sign of someone who was brought up with mixed signals and likely was subject to some criticism and probably brought on part of the idealism that we see in her, in her own kind of critical nature. And whenever you see a second phalanx of Apollo kind of drawn in like this, It's not extreme here, but it is, and it's there as Saturn as well. It's a highly critical nature. It's someone, as I say, with an eye for detail, highly critical of themselves and others. A nitpicker, someone who's, always kind of pointing out things that are wrong with you, with that, with me, and it can be really kind of grating. At the same time, these are strengths when used in the right setting. Now, Saturn being aligned with Jupiter, it really shows us how this person's purpose, their traditions, their values, traditional values, their moral compass, a sense of a duty, and their decision making, their planning, ability to plan, their ambitions as well as their purpose are in alignment with each other. This is a really strong sign. And as well as that, looking at Apollo and Jupiter, they're almost level, um, which is a good sign. I mean, Jupiter's slightly longer, which means this person has, again, greater expectations and ideas of what they're capable of. So it's not there's something out of balance there in that this person is probably expecting too much of themselves, probably working too hard and thinking that they can too much done. There isn't enough time in the day for this person. Their idea of what they are capable of is slightly out of proportion in terms of what they are capable of achieving. Now, notice how the heart line, as it rises and curls up towards in between Jupiter and Saturn, this kind of, I would call it the primary sort of heart line here, it doesn't quite reach far enough for me. And this is something of a selfish kind of nature here. But at the same time, I have mentioned that philanthropy and that charitable um, idealism, and that is out of this branching heartline here. So it's this second kind of, it's a sort of duality of her emotional makeup. There's what this person wants for themselves and others, and there's a separation here because the thumb being quite kind of closed in naturally, um, it shows someone who is, I would say, it's there's this person quite complex because whilst they are quite selfish and self-concerned, at times there are real kind of almost sort of explosions of generosity. I'm going to give to this country. I'm going to give to this charity. I'm going to, at times in their life, they give hugely. But after that, there's a long spell of, right, I'm just going to focus on me now. And that's that. There's no massive concern for family and loved ones and friends as such. It's almost as though this person is two different people, the Jekyll and Hyde kind of nature there. But notice how a heartline towards at the beginning of this person's life, the heartline kind of closes and narrows in as it rises up onto Jupiter, and this is showing again aligning with this ambition line here, and it's this there's the heartline here as this kind of develops and branches outwards. It closed in and it's narrowing the gap between the headline and it's showing I'm not going to give myself. I'm not going to give. I'm not going to be open. I'm not going to be generous. I'm not going to be open-minded even. I'm going to close myself off. Um, and as this person ages, the gap widens and almost sort of closes up again and then widens up again. And it's showing how this person's gone through experiences that has changed her emotional outlook, her emotional psychological landscape has gone through certain changes. Um, and again, it's because of this expectancy in others. That's what's changed that kind of landscape. Look at the lifeline and the way it carves. It's sort of straight line, and it's sort of showing us how this person is on a path, single-minded, sort of um, bold, courageous, ambitious. That's certainly a sign of ambition. Uh, Force towards a certain place, and they're going to get there no matter what. That's what this sort of shows, and quite often you see it in the hands of highly um, successful people. Is lifeline that swings out quite boldly towards Neptune or even lunar and is certainly someone who travels a lot as well, and resides, lives in a country not native to their homeland. But also notice, even though it's doing this, it still narrows Venus. The Venus mount itself is still, the boundaries of it are still restricted. So it's showing us that, again, this person is not as warm as most, and is not as, there's, even though they are a huge personality, a huge um, movie star, even though they're a personality on screen and they play different personalities, arguably, um, this person doesn't have a great deal of personality herself, doesn't have a great deal of warmth, character, charisma, and is likely living a life with very few friends because that's what suits them, because of um, the disappointment through idealism. And because they are a little bit of a loner, they just like it this way. This is just who they are. They find their person and they stick with them and they make it work through thick and thin, and that's that. And they will keep struggling on and keep pen pecking and nitpicking as they go, not realizing what's going on around them, and why people are um, saying things about them, and they don't quite understand that they are so critical, that they are so controlling and authoritative and dominant. They don't really quite get just how they're impacting on others, because to them they are firm but fair. That's not to say they're not thinking, because they are. These hands are certainly fair. They are square, just about square palm, but they're long fingers. Um, they're very analytical. They're deep thinkers, deep feelers as well. But there isn't quite enough introspection. They're thinking a lot, heavily about the outside world. They're soaking up a lot of information. She's clearly a highly intelligent person, and is very capable of absorbing a lot of information, and is very sort of outgoing in that approach. The fingers splaying outward show us this need to um, soak up this information, and to debate, to jump from concept to concept, idea to idea, watch documentaries. These are all very airy traits, but there isn't quite enough introspection. The thumb needs to open out a little bit more, and it needs to calm down a little bit, and gain that self-control. And if this person was able to consider their own thoughts and feelings more and understand themselves, then perhaps they would gain a little bit of insight, gain that introspection, and gain a bit more control and clarity over their own temperament. So, what does the fish mean? Well, there are different types of fish in palmistry. A lot of the time, it is seen as we see it here, demonstrated here with this kind of almost a diamond with a forked tail. Sometimes it's an island with a forked tail. Other times I've seen fishes that literally look like a picture of a fish with a thin, forked tail, more than one fin even. I have even known people to interpret triangles on major Palmer lines themselves to be interpreted as a fish. Others mostly interpret this as a flag. So firstly, I'm going to explain what the fish means in palmistry, and then I'm going to explain what I believe, in fact, this Palmer marking means here, which is, very correctly identified as this shape right here. I'm going to explain what it means on this mount. The fish in itself really carries some kind of Christian connotation, a very spiritual connotation, a powerful kind of religious sort of impactful um, symbol. It's almost as though there is divine gift here. And in Western palmistry, the fish, it kind of, it just, it's not there. It's not really written about all that much. And that's because Western palmistry doesn't really take too much into consideration these extravagant and sort of sensational and complex kind of images in the palms themselves, like, the picture of a temple or a skull or a plant or a swastika, um, petal. These sorts of things in Western palmistry are just sort of disregarded altogether and read as a combination of what each of the palmar lines mean. And that's more what I do. That's more my sort of take on things. I think you can break down each symbol and read it in that way, and that's what I'll be doing here. But to be more specific about what the fish means in Indian palmistry, it's a huge symbol of prosperity, luck, wealth, and it really it shows a tremendous amount of success and fortune that is almost sort of a divine, yes, again having that kind of that spiritual and that religious attachment. For the most part, where the fish is seen, it represents fortune and prosperousness, success and good luck, good fortune. Now, what it means on the sun mount, well, the sun mount is the place of success in itself and joy and happiness. So it's almost like, um, that kind of enhancement. It couldn't be in a better place. And and this really shows a tremendous sign of wealth and fortune. At least that's the Eastern interpretation in terms of what a fish means on the sun mount. My interpretation of this is similar, but the reasons why are a little bit different as to how I come to this conclusion. It's not just as simple as this is what this sign means and that's that. This is what this sign is, it's fish, and this is what it means. It's not quite that clear cut in palmistry for me. It's about concluding from several signs alone. Now, being that this person is analytical and practical, what money means to this person is something we have to assess first before really understanding what we see on the sun map. Now, money means to this person certainly happiness. Because being practical, money does provide happiness. It's security, and security is what makes this person feel happy, as I've already mentioned in this reading. So now we've really understood how this person thinks and feels about money. As well as being analytical, it's not like this person, it's not as though money is the be all and end all for this person. She has a great idea, um, a great sense of sort of clarity. It's just that it certainly does and can bring a great deal of well-being. Shall we put it that way? So, certainly money does mean a great deal to this person because a sun line, essentially, and that's what this is right here, a success line, an Apollo line, for some people, this purely means happiness. The happiness of their loved ones or themselves or good health. It just means joy. It just means doing what they love and having the freedom to do it. For some, money means nothing. And you'll see that in certain hand shapes. The less square hand shapes, that's kind of what that means more in. Um, Happiness means and success, very different things for very different people. So here we have a sun line. That's what this line is right here. Now, this is the interesting formation. Part of the formation of this line is this line right here, because although it is reaching upwards, it's still something of an obstacle. It's on a diagonal. So it is both an obstruction and progress. And my thinking is that this line is in fact originating from a relationship. If you look closely, and maybe I'm looking into it a bit too much, but I think I see something of a horizontal line just creeping across it, and that would show the potential for perhaps having a relationship with someone and a prenup, maybe divorcing, and a prenup comes into play, or potentially if I were to see a relationship line like this is a relationship in later life, drooping down right down like this, it shows divorce and or the potential for their partner, they themselves outliving their partner, and if their partner dies, they leave all this money to them in their will. That's potentially what I see here. And this is potentially what this diagonal means, connected to and by this kind of, this horizontal line coming across here. It's something that is coming into effect. It's affecting everyone's going to know about it. It's crossing the Mercury and the Apollo. It's not something that's going to be hidden. Um, so it is both progress and an obstacle. It's an obstacle because it's hurting their happiness. This person didn't want that person to die or that relationship to break down. But at the same time, it's enabled them because that prenup or that not inheritance, but that money that's left to them is also an enabler. So what we see after this time is a secondary sun line developing, second income stream. And that forms this other portion of this fish. And then we come to the last, um, you know, section of what creates this symbol, this fish, and that is this line right here. And this is inheritance. This is someone they love dying in the family, likely a parent, and it is crushing, and it hurts. It stops their happiness. And money at this point doesn't mean anything. Doesn't matter. They've got money, and so their ability to be happy is almost kind of stunted after this time because it's irrelevant. They've got everything they need materially. But what does it matter if mum or dad or anyone else has left them money? They've inherited a house. So what? That doesn't matter. They didn't care about any of that. They wanted that person alive. And so they're kind of, after this time, they are not as happy. So, whilst the fish in itself is certainly a sign of great wealth and fortune, what's the real price? So, that's my interpretation of what the fish means for this person in this area on this hand. It's not just as clear cut as, oh, well, the fish means this. That's not palmistry. Palmistry is concluding from several circumstantial clues to arrive at an accurate conclusion. All clients want accuracy, and all palmists should hope to achieve that as well, strive for that as well. So, I hope you've enjoyed this palm reading. Sorry to end on a bit of a negative there. Let's just have a look at one last thing. This inheritance here is probably at about the age of, I would put it about 75, which would mean if it isn't her parent, in fact, that her parent lives to a great age. So what I was hoping to see is just how and when this loss might occur. And I think I see it there, but I'm uncertain. This is just not clear enough. But what is interesting is how the fate line takes over from the lifeline. At around about the age of 50, this person had a big move in their life. Well, it was probably more like 35 and then moved again around about the age of 50 to 55. It's hard to see because the angle kind of distorts findings a little bit. But I just wanted to be clear about the timings of things. 75, I believe, is around about the age that this great loss occurs for this person, very unfortunately. But, who wants to live forever? And I suspect that their family members are, hopefully supported and are in good hands by this person. So let me know what your thoughts are on my palm reading for Jennifer Lopez. And please do make a suggestion on who you'd like me to read the hands of for next Sunday. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.